What's up, everybody? It's Troy Cartwright. Welcome back to another episode of 10-Year Town. Before we get started, a couple housekeeping items. The first is that we are in the process of finalizing our first live show, which is exciting. So if you want to be in the loop for all of that, join the 10-Year Town community at 10yeartown.com. And second, I hope you have a great day. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks. Today's guest is Bobby Bones. You know Bobby from his nationally syndicated radio program, The Bobby Bones Show. He is also a podcaster, a TV personality, a winner of Dancing with the Stars. He's written 2 New York Times best-selling books and so much more. I don't know how he does it all, but we do talk about it a little bit in this podcast. We also talk about how he got to Nashville, his future aspirations, and so much more. I really enjoyed this conversation. I know you guys are going to love it. So without further ado, here he is, Bobby Bones. Well, thank you so much for being here.
I was thinking on the way over here, I was driving over, and I listened to the podcast. And what's funny is in an episode of mine, we talk about you. It was coming out this week, but I think now it's coming out next week, but who knows when this airs. But I mentioned this podcast, and what made me kind of realize my own consuming habits are, I go, yeah, I listen to that all the time. And I'd mentioned a couple people that were on, and I think I've actually never listened to it. I've only watched it. But that is that's me consuming a podcast. Even my consumption habits are so different to me, that's like when you say you talk to somebody, but you really texted them, right? That's the 10 years ago version of, I listened to that show, I listened to that podcast. No, I just watch it. But you do a great job. You're like a credible version of me.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, with credibility.
I don't know about that, but I'm trying.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And it's so funny that you mentioned that. The amount of people, I was in a write last week, and it was with my buddy Matt Roy, and he was like, oh yeah, I was watching, I forget which episode it was, but he's like, well, I don't actually ever listen. I just watch the clips, but we do a lot of clips, and I think that's how most people consume
my
the podcast.
wife because my wife is a lot younger than I am. She just turned 17, so it's great. No, she's 32. But she listens to podcasts, but it's watching. So I'll walk in and she'll be watching Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard, or she'll be watching BFFs, and it's just content consumption at this point. And it's where a lot of my career has gone to, where, obviously I do a radio show, but the podcast of that radio show now for the first time, generates as much revenue as the radio show and gets right, which is wild to think of.
Yeah.
And luckily we were, on the forefront of understanding it. I got very lucky. I don't know if you've ever read Outliers, but in the book, he talks about how there are certain people that got very lucky based on circumstances.
Yep.
And Steve Jobs, or Bill Gates, for example, the computer that was in his town, right? And so there happened to be a computer in his town, and he happened to be interested, but there was no computer hundreds of miles, and there just happened to be. I got very fortunate in that when I started, I was very young. And for a long time, I was just the youngest to do this or that. But because of that, I used digital media.
Yeah.
And it would be like, wow, he's so far ahead. He's so smart. No, I'm just young. I just happened to be young. And it wasn't that I was any smarter than anybody else, but I was using YouTube, podcasting 15 years ago. I was doing that. And so it allowed me to just kind of live in the space and create in the space that I was living. And so it's been very beneficial to us. And yeah, it's wild. Again, I've actually never listened to you. I watch every clip though.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm a big fan.
That blows my mind.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, the Outliers thing, kind of same vein. I was listening to this podcast on Mark Zuckerberg, and Facebook, it's the same thing. He was coding, he was really into making little projects, and he set up a version of AIM within his house so his family could talk or whatever. But all of the stuff that he was doing was just, by the time it became possible for like all these people to become connected, he was super young and he was able to do it first, and he's probably like genius level smart.
Yeah. I would think even if it wasn't the creation of it that made him genius level smart, because again, right, he happened to be interested and he was young and he was doing it.
Yeah.
But he was genius level smart to maintain and grow something that didn't need to be grown and was actually harder to grow because it was so big.
Yeah.
Like to me, that's where the real genius came in with Zuckerberg, is that like he could have MySpace Tom that thing and said,
right,
I'll take my millions and get out, but agree with him. Like the thing has become such a part of our culture that he could have just stayed in the social media, Facebook, but he didn't. They bought Instagram.
Yeah.
That was wild at the time.
Yeah.
They spent all the money on Instagram. So yeah, I was very fortunate that I got in this young, because now, well, for a long time I looked like a genius. Now I'm just normal, but it was like, he's so smart. I'm like, no, I just happen to be 15 years younger than everybody else.
Yeah. Do you think about the show, like with all I mean, you'll have the podcast and there's a lot of content that just comes from making the show and making your podcast, and
Sure.
you have all the stuff that you do. Do you think about it that way, as it's all just content?
Yes, more so than ever. Sometimes it irritates the broadcast part of my company.
I understand that.
Because they have such a revenue piece in the broadcast part. And I also understand it.
Totally.
But I've got to balance what's happening tomorrow or next week's bottom line with what's happening in my career 3 years from now.
Yeah.
So yeah, with any of the projects that I do, it has to be able to exist in 3 or 4 places, or it's not worth creating because I only have so much time.
Yeah.
I only have so much capacity. And I used to have I felt like I had unlimited time, unlimited capacity. But then I got married.
Yeah.
And a wife, that's a thing. You have to give it. It's like a plant. You got to water it. Who knew?
Yeah.
So
well, it's somewhere else that like you get to spend your time.
And I never had that. Like I never really had a serious girlfriend until my wife. We've been married 3 years, and I didn't get married till later in life. But I never like had a serious girlfriend. I was never engaged. Never lived. Never told anybody I loved them. Right?
Yeah.
It was like I was just focused on my career, and now I'm finding a bit of balance. And I was always scared of that because I thought it would take me and make me worse because I wouldn't work so much. But what's happened is it's given me, it's softened me a little bit in understanding. But also now, again, I only have so much capacity because I need to prioritize my life and my wife. So if I can't create something that exists in multiple places, it's not worth the time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you find that working less on your actual work because you're spending time investing in building a family and stuff like that, do you find that it makes your work better, or like do you find like you're more focused on the time you do get to spend?
If my wife heard me say I worked less, she would kick these chairs down and be like, "That's not true." But she didn't know me before. Where if it was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I was on the road. I was touring, doing stand up. I was trying to do comedy music. I was shooting, and then I was doing the radio show and the podcast. I have found that I have a better understanding of different parts of life that I did not have before, which allows me to be a better communicator, a better orator, even in different situations. And it's given me new things to try to be funny about. So it's like anything else. When you sacrifice one thing, you get another, but you lose some in the sacrifice. And in a bit, I've lost the ability to put in 16 hours a day of work to only 12.
Right.
But I do think like over time, I think it's made me a funnier, more understanding. It's given me more things. I'm gonna be selfish here, more things to talk about. Like, it's been good. But the thing about my wife, and I've never spoken about I wasn't gonna talk about this, but I've never talked about this before. So about 6 years ago, what year are we now? 24?
Yep.
Maybe 7 at this point. I woke up one morning and I could not read. And it was weird. And so my right eye doesn't work anyway. And I'm just thinking, okay, this is a vision thing. And I couldn't read, but I went to work And I got in, and the morning show, all of those folks, we've all been together 20 years, right?
Yeah.
We've been together forever. I told Amy, who was like my best friend on the show, been my friend forever. I was like, I'm having trouble reading. I think something's wrong in my eyes. And so I had her cover for me that morning. I had some TV stuff I had to do a couple days later in a different city, and I couldn't read the prompter. So I called my doctor, and he recommended me to a specialist, and the specialist says, hey, I think you had a seizure. And I think, I never had one of those before. That's kind of scary. They run all these tests on me. It takes me about 3 weeks or so, but I get back to normal. I don't think anything else about it.
Yeah.
About a year and a half later, it happens again. But this time, not only could I not read identifiable things, easily identifiable things, like I would look at the counter and I go, man, I know that curvy yellow fruit. Man, I know the name of it. I just can't think of it. Like I literally couldn't think of the word banana, right?
Wow.
And so I'm thinking I must have had another seizure. But I never felt anything physically different with my body.
Yeah.
As far as there was never like, like a television seizure where you like tense up and fall down.
Yeah.
Like that never happened. And this is all going back to a point. I promise it's not just a walk down the story time. And so that goes away. I didn't know my wife yet. About 3 weeks before I went on and did Dancing with the Stars, which has been about 5 years ago, I had a very similar feeling where I had no short-term memory because I remember my friend and I who do comedy music, we had written a song and I couldn't remember any of the words. And I have an okay memory. And I couldn't remember any of the words. I couldn't, again, had the reading problem. And when I was learning how to dance on that show, I could not remember a single step. So I had to do all muscle memory, which is a very difficult way to learn. I've never danced before anyway, but I could. So this happens. After the third time it happened, I'm like, I might be prone to like some weird seizure or something. I meet my wife like a year later and I tell her about it. And she's like, that doesn't sound like a seizure. We should call and go to a neurologist. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't think of that. A neurologist, duh.
Yeah.
So we go and he pulls up I do a brain scan. I do it here at Vanderbilt, but he's in New York. He pulls it up and he goes, hey, you've had 3 small strokes. And I'm like, what? And he goes, he can almost tell me that, not the exact dates, but the time frames.
Yeah.
Because of like the gray matter and the movement in my brain. And I was like, wow, are you sure? And he was like, yes. Now here are the reasons. 1, stress. 2, you're not sleeping enough. 3, family history. I don't know my family history because I don't know my parents.
Yeah.
And so my wife was like, all right, my God, you're sleeping now. Like she was such a positive influence on my health because I had 3 strokes. I was ignoring them completely. It was just something that happened.
Yeah.
I never told my work about it because I was in contract negotiations. I didn't want them to hold that against me.
Yeah.
And my whole point with this is when it's like, are you better at work? Like I prioritize things I never prioritized because of her, which allows me to be better at work and allows me just to be better in general, which I don't think I ever had before her. So as I work less, I'm also having less strokes.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
And that's a scary thing. But I think she has made me better in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But mostly I think I'm way funnier because I'm not having strokes and I can read. Yeah.
That does tend to help with the comedy.
Yes, it does. I haven't done any strokes comedy yet. I'm about ready to, start writing that. But I don't know. There's a lot of humor in stroke comedy.
Work on it like a type 5.
Yeah.
For sure.
A type 2.
Yeah.
A type 2.
Wow. Yeah. That's, it is always hard to like articulate what it is about having like a life partner can kind of do for like creative type people that like I am a workaholic, and being in a relationship with someone just gives me so much perspective, and it actually like makes me way more creative just because like I feel like there's like a new level of life that I unlocked that I'm getting to live, and that's like helping me.
How long have you been in a relationship?
I have been married for 6 years.
Okay, you're married?
Yeah.
Hold your hand up. I do see the ring. I have terrible vision because I was looking while you were talking and I did not see it.
Yeah.
So I was in therapy today and I was talking about just being in a relationship like humans.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't have a lot of experience, and I feel like when I married my wife, my emotional intelligence was very low.
Yeah.
My like professional intelligence, freaking 90 years. I'm George Burns. Like, it's
done
like
so much.
Just, and have failed in so many ways, but it's allowed me to succeed in so many ways. But like the human part of it, not very good at it. And we were talking about that today, and I'm like, hey, we've been married about 3 years now, and we've been through some struggles with her health, and how I think it's taken that for me to have an understanding of what I'm capable of as a human being. And I would never wish for her to be sick again or for us to have to deal with this. But and it was very rough on her at first, especially with me, because I had no rules. I mean, I just lived and I ran. But like getting patience, understanding being dependable to another person. I never really knew what loving someone was in a consistent way.
Yeah.
And that hard work of us dealing with her illness has actually made our relationship stronger.
Yeah.
We've only been married 3 years. At 6 years, like I wonder, like how has it changed? What are the different seasons of marriage, and how has that changed you?
I had an interesting, I guess, ride, if you will, because when I got married, my parents, shockingly to me, got divorced basically 2 days after I got back from my honeymoon. So it was like, here's what I thought my life was going to look like. And then it was, here's how it is.
Ooh, question, not to interrupt, but did you start to think about your marriage because you thought they were going to be great forever? And you're like, wow, they probably were like us and thought they were so in love and going to be together forever?
I think it was like my whole, in life you have like the sky looks like the sky. You know where the North Star is. I actually don't, but you understand the analogy. And then one day it's just different. And so it was so hard for me to navigate that because I wasn't young. I was 28, but I was young, and I just signed my record deal, and I really hadn't been in Nashville very long. So there was so much going on, and there was so much that I thought was so important about trying to, make it happen in my career, that I just don't think I was good at being a husband, and not in like I was like cheating or anything like that, just like being present, being a good partner. And so I think what I've really learned a lot about in the last few years is I've sort of like, I had to just do a lot of work to deal with that stuff with my parents. And then the music industry like has its own trauma that it will inflict upon you as you kind of go through it. So it was really just in the last few years that I've just like learned how to care for someone else and to like be there and, try and like just be useful.
Yeah, be there is interesting.
Yeah.
Because be there doesn't mean fix it.
No.
And I did not know I barely do, but at least I know the difference now a bit. I did not know the difference.
Yeah.
I thought be there meant fix it.
Yeah.
And me being there was like, let me just try this. Let's do this. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And now I have learned just to exist positively.
Yeah.
Which is hard.
And even like, I'm such a non-confrontational person, and I'm a people pleaser. So even now, like getting used to like having to tell my wife something that isn't, like good news. Just like, oh, I can't do this thing that you want me to do because I have to do this other thing. And just understanding that like, I just got to share the information, and we just got to work our way through it, sit with it, be uncomfortable, and understand that it'll be okay.
That's so familiar and like newly familiar to me, because I knew what the definition of the term was, but I never knew what codependency was because I never had it, because I did not care.
Yeah.
In any part of my life or career, did not care. I was going to do what I set forth to do, and that was it, and didn't care what anybody thought. It made me feel no different how people thought.
Yeah.
I learned what codependency was because, again, having uncomfortable conversations. I am not a people pleaser, but I became one in a way that wasn't healthy.
Yeah.
And I would be extremely concerned about how she was going to feel, and that would change how I would feel. Now, there's a level of that needs to be had because you are in a relationship.
Yeah.
But when I'm completely dependent on her and how she's feeling, not even physically, but I learned codependency, and I took a crash course in it, and took a crash course on how to try to not be it.
Yeah.
But I think even being codependent a bit in a relationship, because I don't feel like I am as much anymore because I can acknowledge what it is. I had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
As far as like the human feeling of it. Like even understanding that, like that's pretty cool. Like that's growth that I would have never had it not been forced upon me.
Yeah.
And forced growth is still good growth. It sucks while you're growing.
It's painful.
It's like the physically growing. When you're 14, that hurts.
Yeah.
There's no growth you do that doesn't hurt. But what's awesome is after you're grown, it feels pretty freaking good.
Yeah. Yeah. You just know a little bit more, and then the wheel turns again.
What's crazy too is the more I grow, if that's the term we're using, it's it's so like Socratic, the less I know, period. Like the more I kind of figure out and understand about me and understand about us, and the more I'm like, oh, I really have no idea.
Yeah.
And also nobody else does either, right?
No.
Yeah. And I think the more that I have like become a real life human being, I feel like Pinocchio almost, like I was just a little wooden toy forever.
Yeah.
The more I've become a real life human being, the more I actually realize that I have no clue.
Yeah.
When I thought I knew.
Yeah. That's exactly right. The more you learn, you realize the less you know about anything. But you have had such a fascinating life.
I love that term. Yeah. I thought you were going to say great. And I was like, well, fascinating that is a huge compliment to my career because it feels very fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to think, so we kind of just got right into it, but normally I do start this thing off just by asking like, how long have you been in town? Sort of the starting gun question, but
let's do the whole starting gun thing. We can just do it 10 minutes. It's like good shows now. They don't even roll the credits till 12 minutes in.
That's right.
Yeah. You're like 15 minutes into the Americans and they finally tell you who's in the show.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. I'm ready.
All right. So Bobby, how long have you been in town?
Moved here in 2013. So maybe 2012, 2013. So 11, 12 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's been awful, pretty good, really good, bad, and now it's really good again.
That's good.
Yeah, it's a season.
Yeah. And you came from Austin, I want to say.
You want to say correct?
And then before that, Little Rock.
That's correct.
And then before that, Hot Springs.
I'm from Arkansas, so I started working at a really small station in Hot Springs, Arkansas, while I went to college. And I was 17. And then from there, I went to Little Rock. And I mean, really almost got fired in Little Rock. I got very lucky. We did some real stupid stuff. And went to Austin. Austin's awesome.
Yeah.
It is the greatest city.
Yeah.
And it's not cold. Here it gets cold for like 2 months. And that sucks.
And the sun sets now.
Dude, it's like
3:30.
at noon, it's like dark. I know. It's like crickets start at noon. The traffic lights come on.
Yeah.
Austin was great for me because in the best way, nobody had any faith that I would do anything big. No one thought I would be nothing.
Yeah.
But nobody had any faith that I was going to do anything big. And that was really the best thing to ever happen to me because nobody cared what I did. And so in Austin, I built my own syndication company, paying $2,000 a time for these little Comrex boxes that people were only using for remote broadcasts. And the fact that they thought nothing of it, not that they thought nothing of it.
Right.
They thought nothing of it.
Yeah.
Was the greatest gift to me because I got to figure it out and, had 25 or 30 affiliates. I was paying for all the stations myself. I learned how to do business.
Yeah.
Like all those things were really, really hard work. And then they had promised, like most corporations do, hey, we have this next step for you coming up. And that didn't work out because they were like, go to New York, go to LA. And Seacrest re-signed in LA and Elvis Duran re-signed in New York. And they were like, well, we have nothing for you. And I was like, well, I'm going to leave then.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, what do you want to do? and I'm from Arkansas and I grew up on country music, but also knew that country music doesn't mean just country music,
Right.
which is also what got me in trouble here too. But I was like, I would love to go to Nashville. There's never been a national show. And then that's kind of how this happened many years ago.
Yeah. How it all got started.
Yeah. Then they bought the company from me that I'd sort of built.
Yeah.
And I moved here, and it was awful and then awesome.
Were you scared?
Oh yeah, because I'd, the old burn the boats. I had to burn the boats.
Yeah.
I was forced to burn the boats because all of the money that I had spent on this technology that really wasn't used for syndicating radio shows, I sold all the equipment back, and all the affiliates that I had hustled myself, we gave to the guy that was doing top 40, because I was on top 40 stations, hip hop stations.
Yeah.
And we were leaving, so they gave them to the other guy in the company. I couldn't get them back. So this was it. I had to burn the boats and move to Nashville.
Yeah.
My choice.
Right.
But yeah, it was really scary.
Wow.
Especially because it's one of these where I thought it was a curse my whole life and ended up being the greatest blessing. I didn't come from any money. Like, we were very poor. So I was like, I can figure it out. And if I'm poor again, that's okay. But you don't want to be poor again.
Yeah.
But it's like, worse goes to worse, I'm back to even.
Yeah. It's like you're not necessarily, you don't want to be, but you're not like afraid of it.
Dude, all charted waters. Me being poor, charted waters have been there. So yeah, we moved here and made a run.
Wow.
We're still running. We're trying.
It worked out.
It's yeah, in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you, I was thinking, I mean, there's so many like different questions that I could ask that we could never get to them all. But I was curious, like, so when you first started, like, even when you were back in Little Rock or Austin, like, how did you learn, like, what was gonna move the needle as far as like, obviously I know very little about radio, but it's like, you're trying to get ratings. Is this correct?
Yes. Now lesser so.
Yeah.
But then only so.
Yeah.
Yes. Moving the needle is interesting because I tried to move the needle in wrong ways, meaning I didn't want to be like I am now. Because I was born in the 80s, and even in like the 90s when I would listen to the radio, everybody had that big booming voice.
Yes.
And it was to be a DJ. And I sucked at being a DJ. I really wanted to be a good one. Like, that was my goal.
Yeah.
I wanted to get on and talk up song ramps and do a noise and auga, all of that. But I never had the voice for it. I also wasn't smooth enough for it. And for me to survive, I had to kind of have something that hit a little funky. And that was just being my neurotic self and not putting on any sort of voice at all. And what's been great about that is it's so normalized now because we podcast. Everybody podcasts.
Yeah.
And everybody talks like normal. But 7-8 years ago, when you would hear our radio show, we would always get two kinds of people. We'd get the kind that hated it because it sounded nothing like a radio show, because none of us have good voices. My whole crew, they'd never done radio. Wow. It's all of a, or you get the people going, wow, this is so different that we think we like it.
Yeah.
So for me, it was never, I'm so smart, I'm gonna move the needle. It was, I'm trying to survive and I don't have the tools to survive in the classic way. So let me try this. And it just so happened that did well for me. Just a sort of like an honesty approach. I've never been extremely relatable, but people have always related to really specific things in my life.
Yeah.
And that's been good, because being non-relatable means you're odd.
Right. You're different.
Yes. But it's very nice if you say different when I say odd. Thank you. But having extremely relatable facets of your life, people like care, and if you're honest, they root for you and they understand. And I think it's been a really healthy mix of the two.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Like even now, and again, I'm really rich now. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I have no problem saying that, because again, I was a food stamp kid and that is not relatable. However, I don't expect people to relate to me in every way, but I can be like, I am extremely rich now, and it's so messed up at the things rich people get away with because I can understand. And most of my life I wasn't. And
Yeah.
I've never really, even now, I don't hide from that because I feel like as soon as people start taking me as someone who's not honest, they're not going to believe anything I say. And I don't care if they like everything I say. I just need for them to feel like what I'm saying is at least my version of authenticity.
Well, yes, but I mean, I think that's the whole thing, is being authentic.
Yes.
And it's true in songwriting as well. Like your unique story, a situation that is incredibly unique to you somehow has universal appeal. And I've never quite figured out why that is, but like the more specific I am, a lot of times the more people that relate to it.
It's crazy. You've seen that in songwriting, especially in the last couple of years. The more the uber specific you are.
Yeah.
But I use the example of like, I'm really rich, because that's an unlikable thing to say.
Sure.
And I say that just to go, look at this very unlikable thing I can say.
Yeah.
But I know it's unlikable, and I can go, and it's bizarre. And at the same time, like this, I want to be so rich when I run for office, I don't need anybody's money.
Yeah.
Like that's my goal financially.
I love that.
Is that I want to have so much money. I don't need to care if people are giving me money, because if you don't come from money, there are two things. You're either very stingy or you're very generous.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I got a little bit of both in that, in me.
Yeah.
Where I love to just give crap away. But also it's like, I now get to like buy things that I wanted as a kid. You know, I see my baseball card collection. I'm like 11.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So I can be extremely unrelatable, but relatable. But if I'm honest, like that's where the power is for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Is even the vulnerability of going, yeah, I know people aren't going to like this, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's worked for me.
Yeah.
The rich thing's only been recent. That's pretty cool though.
Yeah. It sounds awesome.
It is awesome.
Yeah.
That part of it's pretty cool.
Like what's just something that I wouldn't think of that you can do when you're rich that you couldn't do when you weren't?
I mean, we have an airplane. It's awesome.
Just go wherever.
It just changed. Yeah, I mean, I use it for work. I mean, mostly, because then I'm like, how much is gas? Like I'm looking up gas prices at the same time. And so that's awesome.
Yeah, that's like basically a time machine, right?
It changes everything. Like if I'm if I go to do a show in Charleston, I'll be back home that night.
You just go home.
Just go home right after the show, which is that part of it's awesome. But again, I can see like all the tricks, and I'm like, wow, rich people suck. I hate rich people. I hate them. I hate rich people that grew up with money. Like they're the worst because they have no understanding of what it's like to have to like show up every single day, week to week. Like for 28, 29 years, 30 years of my life, it was, what kind of food can I get at the grocery store this week? Am I just getting the noodles and bologna, mustard, white bread?
Yeah.
Or can I do a little better this week? And that was 30 years of my life.
Yeah.
So I think as I've gotten older, I'm like, what even am I doing? And I think that's what it is. I think I want to get to the point where I have an understanding of how rich people are getting away with bull crap, and I want to somewhat fix it.
Yeah.
As to where, like for me, we rarely had 3 meals a day growing up, and I was on free lunch at school. I just want food insecurity to not be like, that's my thing, food insecurity.
Yeah.
And I think I can be a part of that solution.
That is very inspirational.
Kind of.
Yeah. But I mean, if you look at the world, we got enough food, right?
Oh, dude, we have enough money.
Yes.
We have enough food. Yes.
Everybody should have food.
Yes. And so, and it is a weird place to be.
Yeah.
But I've been very fortunate, and I have a lot of like-minded people that we work together. And even like what Paisley's doing in town with the kitchen, with his grocery store. Like people that know, it kind of doesn't matter what level they get to, they still know, and you can't shake that from them. And I just don't want to not be that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the goal. But yeah, this town's been great.
Yeah.
Mostly.
What do you, like, you talk about you doing your anything you do kind of has to like work in several different verticals. Mm-hmm. How do you, if you could look in your crystal ball, like what's going to happen because I feel like since I moved to town 8 years ago, people are like, well, radio is going away. And it's like, is it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, everything comes and goes, but it all just manifests itself in a different way. I mean, to me, radio is anything on the phone, right? I mean, that's how I've had to reapproach my version of creation was, are as many people listening on a friggin' transistor or whatever no, they're not. Yeah. But are people listening to podcasts like crazy? Are people listening to stream? Yeah. Like to me, that has to be radio or I'm gone.
Right.
So if you say, is radio dying? I would say no, because my understanding and my version of radio is not what somebody else you may sit in this chair says.
Yeah.
Like mine just doesn't come through at 88.2.
Yeah.
Mine has to exist on the phone, on YouTube. That's radio.
Yeah.
But again, radio is just content. And so it's all content. It's a content world.
Yeah, it is. For right or for wrong.
And with music, it is bizarre because, one of my closest friends, like media friends, but he's also a very close friend of mine. His name is Charlemagne the God. He is one of the big hip hop guys, but he has television shows. He hosts a daily show. He was at the house yesterday. He was in town doing some HBCU college stuff, and it's literally what we were talking about is radio and what it even means.
Yeah.
And if you try to define what radio means, you don't have a grasp of what radio is, which is just content in 100 different ways.
Yeah.
So radio will be here forever. Now, will it be coming over a transmitter?
Who knows?
Probably a little bit.
Yeah.
Probably network television model a bit.
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting to see sort of like country music grappling with this sort of like the way that we minted stars is different now.
Yeah, there's no control, no gatekeepers. It's awesome.
It's been great.
The people get to be the gatekeepers, but also the bad part is too, the algorithms get to be the gatekeepers.
And that's
so the good and the bad.
Yeah, that's where it gets, I think it's hard. It's really hard on creators, especially like if you're a young person just getting started. It's like you're living and dying by if this thing goes viral or not. And I think that is like mentally a tough place to be, but life is hard.
I think it's the same but different.
Yeah.
Meaning 10 years ago, mentally you'd be going crazy because some guy down on Music Row wouldn't give it a listen.
Right.
At least now you have an opportunity to get lucky.
Yeah.
If you're good. Isn't that a weird thing to say, to get lucky if you're good?
Yeah. But it's true.
Yeah, it is true. And most of the times, if you're really good, eventually you get lucky.
Right.
So it's the same in that, it sucks. But if you really want it, you just have to keep going.
Yeah.
And that can be really frustrating. That's why the name of your podcast is the name of your podcast.
Yeah.
That's why they call it a freaking 10-year town.
Yeah.
We both probably have friends that were here 8, 9, 10, 12 years, and then all of a sudden they're new artists.
Yeah. Even I forget who, it was like someone was making some commentary on like a new artist for the Grammys, and it was like, oh, there's 6 albums in and on year 14. And it's like, yeah, but that's normal. I want to normalize that to work on your craft and become great at what you do oftentimes takes 10, 15, 20 years, and that's okay.
They should call it new to mass consumption artist.
They should.
It's like Mitchell Tenpenny this year at the CMAs up for Best New Artist.
Yeah, that might have been what I was thinking about too.
Mitchell's been around since the 40s. Him and Cash toured together. So, Mitchell's had numerous number ones.
Yeah.
But, why? And I asked him the official rule, and it was like, maybe he hasn't put out a full album. It's something like, or maybe he's never been nominated for any CMA before.
I see.
I think that's what it was.
Okay.
That works.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's like people defining what country music is. Like when we start putting definitions on crap, then you allow art to be defined. You can have opinions, but defining it is where I start to just be devil's advocate for no reason.
Yeah.
Like defining art with boundaries, I do not like. Although I will argue with you if something is not country, I'll be like, that's not, but then I'll go, but I'm not the judge.
Well, that's the point. It's a philosophical argument at the end of the day.
It can't be won.
It's impossible to win because there's no rules.
And shouldn't be won.
No.
But it's the people that think it should be one that I want to slap the piss out of. Because I'm not right.
Right.
I have my opinions. I'm very strong-willed with my opinions, but I also know there is no right. It's just the people that are so for sure they're right.
Yeah.
What gets them, what I love doing. I don't mean to sidetrack you.
No, it's fine.
What I love doing is when people are just so sure that something isn't country music. And I'll be in some of these panels and I'll say, what is country music to you? And I can just wait. And they'll say, steel guitar. I'll be like, well, when Bob Wills, and his band actually, took a steel guitar and amped it up, that was like putting an 808 in a country song now.
Yeah.
Like that or an electric guitar, or what else can I say? Well, it's if you're from the South and you have an understanding of hard work. And I'm like, that is for sure a version of it. But country music would not exist if it weren't for the slave ships from Africa, and with banjos and fiddles from Europe, and immigrants moving here into that area. So unless that's what you want it to be, like that, if we're going to go all the way back to like the root of country music, then the only thing it can be is the music that was brought over from Africa and Europe.
Yeah.
And that seems to not be what you're fighting for, sir.
Right.
But I will allow your answer, but you have to also allow mine. But no, that ain't country. That triggers me. That triggers me.
Yeah. Well, and people, I'm constantly bothered by people who think that their opinion is the only possible opinion, because life is too varied. And if you think you know anything, like, come on.
I love a strong opinion. I hate somebody when they are for sure they're right, when you can't possibly be right. And art is a place where you can't be right. You can get lucky.
Yep.
But you can't be right. And even if you get lucky, you're not going to be right for very long.
No, and you never really know. Like, I can think of the success I've had in my artist career with things that have gone viral on the internet. No idea. I got no clue. And if I try to do it again tomorrow, like, maybe. I mean, I know a little bit how it works, but there's no possible way. You just get lucky.
And you just have to keep going.
Yeah.
And if you're good, you'll get lucky. And you got to get lucky in order to be good.
Yeah.
And so, again, there's no formula except just show up over and over again. That's been my whole career, just showing up over and over again.
Well, you're very inspirational in that way. In that I feel like I was listening to, I can't remember which interview it was, but you were on someone else's podcast, and I think you were just talking about like, just one of your philosophies was like when you were syndicating your show, people would ask you for stuff like an ad read or whatever. You just do it.
I do it now.
And you just get it out. You don't worry too much about like, I don't know if it's perfect. I'm sure you try to get it as great as you can, but it's like, just show up, do your best, put it out, repeat.
I think that, and I've heard this from a lot of different people, the absolute best ability is just availability, because anybody can be available.
Yeah.
And the key to my success, and I would say the key to really anyone's success, unless you have such a talent, unless you can sing like Mariah Carey, then you can be as awful as a person as you want, right? But very few of us can actually sing like that. Is that the things that you can control? You can show up on time, you can have a good attitude, and you can have a good work ethic. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's not going to work, but most times if you just have those three things, it is.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to write a whole book about that, but those are I swear to God, those are the three things.
Yeah.
Just show up on time. That's such a big one that people, it's almost like drinking water and sleeping, meaning we try to drink water, and every once a year we get that big jug and we're like, I'm going to carry this jug around and drink this whole thing of water every day. And then we get tired of carrying the jug around. Or it's like, I'm going to get more sleep. But we always think, well, if I don't get enough sleep tonight, I can get it tomorrow. Or, well, I don't drink enough water now. I try to, I don't get enough sleep. But those are the two most important, like fundamental things that are so easy to do right, and we ignore them.
Yeah.
That I find that people also do the same with showing up on time and having a good attitude and work ethic.
Yeah.
Like they're like, a few minutes late here, a few minutes late there. If you can't do the little things right, why would I let you do the big things?
Yeah.
And I deal with that all the time in the creative space. It's like, if you can't do the tiny things right, why in the world would we let you do the big things?
Yeah. And it's hard to like I'm naturally, I do not trust anyone. Like trust is earned. So when you have people trying to help you with stuff, it's so common. It's like, we just messed up like the second thing we ever did together. Like how could we move? How could we keep going?
Why do you not trust people? Where does that come from?
Because I think throughout my life, particularly in my career, it's just sort of been, I don't know why I haven't gotten to the other side of this coin yet, if you will. But ultimately, I feel like if I don't do it myself, it won't get done. And so I've tried to rely on people, and there are people that I rely on now. I've gotten better about it. But like, I think it's just like a little bit of trauma of like.
From what? Like what happened? Because I don't trust either. I'm wondering your version though.
On like a macro level, you know, when I was signed.
So this is all career.
I think so.
What about personal life? Do you have those issues in your like with?
Not as much. No.
Okay. All right.
No, it's mostly career. I'm very trusting of my in my relationships. I think in my career, it's just like, you know, I didn't know any better. So when I first kind of got in the system, it was like you get all these people and they're like, we got it. And then 3 years go by and you're like, wait, do you have it? And then you slowly realize like, no one has it. And it's all going to go away unless you do it. And so that, gosh, it just took a long time for me to kind of work through that. And I'm still working through it.
Did you ever get burnt real bad?
I think I just got let down a lot. You know, like we're gonna do this. We're gonna take this song to radio. And then, you know, it's gonna take 6 more months and then it goes to radio and then it's like nothing happens. Now I can look at that now and go, okay, well that was what I should have done more, right? Because no one's gonna care more than me. But I just didn't know. I think I like was too willing to listen to people telling me that like, oh, everything's fine. You're going through the process.
What would you do different if you moved to town though with like tomorrow?
Yeah.
Or even then with all the knowledge you have now, what would you do different?
That's a good question. I think I would just realize that I have a lot more agency than I thought I did.
That is the greatest thing to know. It is. That's and you have to learn that.
I didn't know that I could like go to someone at the label, for example, and be like, hey, what's going on here? I thought that would be annoying.
It's intimidating here.
Yeah, it is. Cause there's a whole system.
But nobody knows anything.
I know.
That's what we learn. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, we've been here long enough now to know that you're right. If you don't take agency, but it just feels scary to take agency because is that even allowed? Are they going to cut me? Are they going to?
Yeah. Are they gonna, exactly. It's very scary, but now I don't have as much fear, but it's been, you know, it's always just an evolving process of trying to, you know, if I look at where I am and where I want to be, I know that I need help to get there.
Any art, if it's singing or writing or painting or doing the 9 things that I do only moderately well, everybody wants to do them because they're fun. So that means the market is saturated with folks trying to do it. That means there's no money. Why would there be money for entry-level art?
That's right.
Everybody wants to do it. It's fun. It seems easy. It's not easy, but it seems easy. It's once you prove that you are, that's a bad word, a commodity, that that's when the money starts to come. When you build an audience, when you have enough followers, I know. Whenever you have, like, that's when it comes. And all of that, it's like the iceberg meme. Have you seen it where maybe it's an educational meme where you only see the tip of the iceberg coming out of the water and underneath you see all the iceberg and it's all the layers of broke, lost a job, failed, dropped from label. And the one tip that's out that's like, hey, had a sold out show yesterday. And that's all anybody sees.
Right. They don't see all the other stuff.
But it takes all the other stuff. And what's great about all the other stuff is that all the other stuff, when you finally get that tip, it allows you to continue. You have all this knowledge of sucking and screwing. I'm talking about myself and screwing up and being sued. And so then whenever the tip happens to go back under the water, you're not worried about it. You've been through it before. You get there
That's
again.
right. You're not afraid because it can't hurt you anymore.
You've been there.
Someone has come around and kicked my Jenga tower over so many times that it's just, at this point, it's like, okay,
Let's build it again.
I'll just do it again. No problem.
Do it again. Yeah.
No sweat. Well, I got one last question for you before we get out of here, which is, if you could go back to younger you and give yourself a piece of advice for the journey ahead, what would you say?
Oh, it's such a loser answer, and it's so simple, but it's like, just don't quit. Like, if it's important to you, don't quit. That's it.
Yeah.
Anything that I've ever done successfully, if it's radio or writing books or, I'm an okay stand-up. Like, I would sell out theaters, but I'm not as good a stand-up as my ticket sales reflected. So I'm okay. Any of that is just because I was not good for a long time. I don't really have a skill that I can bank on that goes, this is my skill. I can lay on it, and if times get tough, I'll just go back to my skill.
Yeah.
I don't have one of those. It's a Swiss Army knife of things that I've chiseled out over the years. But all of those little knives and blades and corkscrews have just come because I haven't quit.
Yeah.
So that's non-romantic advice that anybody could hear. It's like when people say, what's your advice on being married? Communicate. Well, what the F does that mean, communicate? Oh, everybody communicate. Of course.
Yeah.
But it is, don't quit. If it bothers you to not do it, you should be doing it.
Yeah.
And there's at times really tough decisions have to be made in life. Again, if I look back and see the things that I'm most grateful for, they're the things that I was the least grateful for 3/4 of my career. The best thing to ever happen to me was having nothing. I had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
That is the absolute greatest gift that was ever given to me, was that I had nothing. That I have empathy. I can be the richest person in the world. You can't have empathy unless you earned empathy.
Yeah.
And there's an understanding. And I'm not empathetic to everything. I don't understand everything, but I understand a kid without a dad, or a kid without food, or anything that like, there are times I just wish I cared about birds or something that wasn't like selfish. I just wish I wanted to save like a cockatoo. Yeah. But I don't. I'm really, the things that I care about are things that have happened to me. But you can't buy that. I'm very grateful for that, but you don't get that without experiences that aren't pleasurable.
Yeah.
But that's what life is, like hard stuff that makes you hard in the best way. That sounds weird. But yeah, I think that's it. Just don't quit. And I know there are a lot of like songwriters and new artists that listen to this podcast, and that is the most cliche thing, but I can tell you from somebody that has never really been good at anything, I only got great at things by not quitting and being bad, then being, okay, that was fine. Now he's pretty good. Oh, wow, this guy's an overnight success. You're out of your mind. I've been doing this for freaking 100 years. I was with Mitchell Tenpenny on the Johnny Cash tour back in the 20s, So yeah, that's my advice to young me, is don't stop, because you'll be sad if you do. Yeah.
Is there anything you quit that you wish you wouldn't have?
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
No. And I think about regrets sometimes. And sometimes I think I'll go, you know what? I don't have regrets because I've learned from a lot of my mistakes. Like, I got sued for millions of dollars. Did an FCC thing, got fined millions of bucks. All this stuff happened. I don't regret any of that because I learned a lot from a lot of things. The only thing that I regret is not spending more time with my grandma, who adopted me before she died. Like, that's my only regret. It's nothing. And I'm a guy that is built on professional, because that's all I've done until I met my wife.
Yeah.
And you would think it would be something in my professional career. It's not spending enough time with my grandma when she got old before she died, because she raised me.
Yeah.
And I started to be 17, 18, 19 years old and just thought she'd go on forever.
Yeah.
Like, that's my regret. Nothing professional, because anything stupid I've done to this point, I've learned a very valuable lesson from it.
Yeah.
So what about you? What's your biggest regret?
Man, that's a great question. I'm thinking. There's so many.
What came to mind first, even if it's not the real one that you'd go with? Like what popped in there? What bingo balled up to the top?
I'm so focused on me and my work, writing songs, touring, all this stuff. It's all consuming. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening now that I'm realizing 6, 7, 8 years ago, I stopped being a good friend to a lot of people because I just couldn't. I didn't have the time. And some of those like chickens are coming home to roost, and it's painful because
as in you're lonely, or you have no a support system you trust.
It's not that I'm lonely. It's that there are people that I care about very much that I didn't invest in, and so they've moved on. You know, we're still friends, but like it won't ever be like it was. And that's life, and people grow apart all the time. But that was kind of what came to mind is like, just got some friends from like some OG friends that I've had since I was 12, where I just realized like, man, I haven't been a good friend to you.
Like from home.
Yeah.
Like from Texas.
Yeah. Yeah. Just that I haven't been,
look at you. You're growing right in front of me.
I'm trying.
For somebody that cares and has dedicated so much to his professional life, the thing that popped in first was something personal.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
In the worst way, and in the best way,
well,
right?
It's a lesson, and you try and just take that going forward, and
you have to learn it too, is what sucks.
Yeah.
Because people could hear us saying this and be like, those guys, I'm just going to keep on. That's a learned.
That's
a learned.
It's just another one you learn the hard way.
Well, I really appreciate you having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm a big fan. Like, depending on who you're talking to, it's like you ask really interesting questions, and you're what I would want to be if I had the credibility of being that and coming from a place that you come from. Me, I just it's different. I'll just say it's different, but I like where you come from. Like I like in this business, in this art, like your story of like success and not success and but that story adds so much to this story, which is what makes this good.
Yeah.
It's almost like you needed that in order to make this as good as it is. And you would never wish that upon yourself. The thing that you're talking about, some of the promises that you were told and given, and you would never want them to not come to fruition. But the fact that they did it and you have this perspective, it makes you so much better at this.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thanks again for being here. I appreciate it very much. And that's it. That's the pod.
That's the pod.
See you later.
All right.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening. If you want to submit a question for one of our Q&A episodes, you can do so at tenuretowne.com. We would love it if you would join the Tenuretown community, which just means we'll send you updates via email about stuff we got going on. And of course, please rate and review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Wherever you listen or watch this thing, we appreciate you so much. See you next week.